Welcome to this YGAM workshop, looking into the links between neurodiversity, gaming and gambling. We are YGAM, an award-winning charity with a mission to ensure that every child and young person is empowered to lead a safe digital life free from gaming and gambling harms. And we do this through awareness raising, education and research. Through a portfolio of evidence-based programs, we develop and deliver training and resources for a range of groups who have influence over children and young people. Now, our learning objectives for today's session are to understand what is meant by the term neurodiverse, to understand both the appeal and risks of gaming and gambling for neurodiverse young people, to have increased confidence when talking to young people about the risks, and to know where to go for support. So let's start by actually looking at that term neurodiversity and what it actually means. Neurodiversity is a term that refers to the natural differences between people and was first coined in the late 1990s by Australian sociologist Judy Singer. Between 15 to 20% of children and young people are currently estimated to be neurodiverse. Now, before we move on to looking at specific examples of neurodivergence and how they may link to gaming and gambling harms, we're going to very briefly explain Dr. David McKellen's human motivation theory. Now, this theory identifies that throughout life, we're constantly seeking three key needs: A, B, C, autonomy, belonging, and competence. So autonomy is the power of self-determination, being able to choose your own destiny and be in control of your life. Belonging, a feeling of fitting in, and then competence. We want to feel that we're good at what we're doing. Now, for a young person potentially struggling with academia or traditional sports or having few friends, we can see that these three needs are not being met. But when we compare them to video gaming and stepping into the digital world, suddenly they have all three. Autonomy. All of a sudden, they can pick their own adventures, they can choose their own avatars, they can choose their own skins and weapons. So they've got a great deal of control. Belonging. So they can be playing online with loads of different friends who really enjoy the same sorts of things that they do, and they start to build that community. And then competence. That leveling system that they can see where they're unlocking new skills, they're getting higher level skins, they can see that their rank is going higher. So in the gaming world, these three key needs are being met very quickly. And this is particularly impactful on children with neurodiversity, where mainstream schools can present a unique set of challenges that may make the educational experience more difficult. Now, researchers writing for the British Psychological Society spoke with 12 boys with autism about gaming. And we can see from what they're saying how gaming can meet the key needs outlined in McKellen's theory. So one participant said, "We like the same thing, so we can chat about the game, and then you feel like you're in the group because you all like the same thing. We don't have to think about something to talk about, and if we don't want to talk, then we can just mute our headset. But if we want to talk, we can." So you can really see how the need to belong is being met here and how gaming can support someone with autism. Another participant said, "I can actually do it without any help or someone watching over me all the time and giving me constant instruction. Do this, do that, constant voices. I can just hear myself when I play. It's peaceful and quiet. I know what I'm doing anyway. It's much better." So here we can see how gaming provides a sense of autonomy and a feeling of competence. And it's important for us to have this in our minds as we move on to looking at how neurodivergence can link to gaming and gambling behaviours and what needs are potentially not being met for that young person. So if we start by looking at ADHD, so attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This defined is a developmental disorder characterised by an ongoing pattern of one or more of the following types of symptoms: inattention, such as having difficulty paying attention, keeping on task, or staying organised. Hyperactivity, such as often moving around, feeling restless, or talking excessively. And then impulsivity, such as interrupting, intruding on others, or having trouble waiting one's turn. So how does this affect rates of addiction? Well, a 2024 study found that 59% of recently diagnosed ADHD adults were living with at least one behavioural addiction. Internet addiction was the most common at 33.9%, and gambling disorder was 3.6%, compared to around 0.5% of the UK population as a whole. So what are the reasons behind this? Impulsivity and dopamine seeking. So ADHD is linked with impulsivity and that seeking of dopamine, leading to higher addiction risks due to potential difficulties in controlling impulses and a need for dopamine boosts. Some people with ADHD use substances to self-medicate, attempting to alleviate their symptoms, which can result in dependency. Childhood trauma is more common in those with ADHD, further increasing the risk of substance use disorders. Higher rates of addiction, so individuals with ADHD are significantly more prone to develop substance use disorders. They're 5 to 10 times more likely to develop alcohol addiction, and 25% of adults in treatment for substance abuse have ADHD. Lower levels of serotonin. Functional MRI studies have indicated that individuals with ADHD may have reduced activity in brain regions associated with serotonin neurotransmission, particularly in the prefrontal cortex. This can lead to seeking activities that encourage the release of serotonin. And then finally, difficulties with motivation. So dopamine insufficiency in the ADHD brain affects motivation, privileging short-term payoff over long-term goals. This can lead to challenges in starting and completing tasks that do not provide immediate rewards. So let's have a look at gaming harm, because gaming may appeal to individuals with ADHD because of stimulation. It provides constant stimulation and immediate rewards, and this is particularly appealing to adolescents with ADHD, as they may find motivation more of a challenge compared to their peers and find the quick wins and fast pace really engaging. Structure and predictability, the clear rules and objectives within games, provide a contrast with real-life complexities and create a safe space for young people with ADHD, as they can focus and understand more clearly. Escapism. Gaming offers a sense of achievement and control, which may be areas missing for them in the real world, which links back to both autonomy and competence in the human motivation theory. And then finally, social interaction. Online gaming provides a platform for social interaction and a sense of belonging, which is another basic need. Studies have shown that ADHD is linked with a higher risk of developing gaming disorder due to these factors, with one study suggesting levels of gaming disorder in those with ADHD could be as high as 4.3%. So we're going to move on to looking at the links between gaming and gambling harm with autism. And as we begin to look at these links, I want to start with a couple of quotes here from gamers with autism explaining their motivation. I wasn't a weird outsider when I was playing games. I could relax, be myself, and quiet my forever chattering mind. There were no obscure social cues to look out for, no need to concentrate on making eye contact for just the right amount of time, nor controlling my facial expressions. Losing myself for hours on end in one of the worlds of my many games like Sims, I no longer worry about fitting in. School is hard. I don't know how to do all this stuff, but when I play games, I still learn skills, but not with all that constant nagging. It's pressure all the time. I can just get a moment of not having that. So let's bear these motivations in mind as we look at some of the research available that explores the links between autism and gaming disorder. Research on autistic adolescents' sense of self-identity included an analysis of the answers to the question, what do you enjoy most? The most enjoyable experience was access to technology and gaming, demonstrating the importance of gaming to autistic children and young people. A recent systematic review of the research literature on autism and video game use confirmed that autistic children, adolescents, and adults may be at greater risk of problematic video gaming than their neurotypical peers. The studies indicated that on average, autistic individuals spend over 2 hours playing internet games each day, with a weekly average of 12 to 17 hours. Although this is below the level of gaming to confirm a formal diagnosis of internet gaming disorder, it is greater than their neurotypical peers and also greater than paediatric guidelines suggest is healthy. Autistic children also play more internet games than their non-autistic siblings and spend more time playing internet games than other extracurricular activities. A study of over 100 autistic adolescents identified that a characteristic of their internet gaming was defensive and secretive behaviours and concealment of internet use from their parents, suggesting they are more vulnerable to experiencing harm. So reasons for these links were examined in a study in 2013. It suggested that video games are particularly appealing to those with autism, given the game's audiovisual and structural characteristics, and the fact that they are associated with low social demands. Video games may be particularly rewarding. When we're thinking about the risks associated with gaming for young people, we need to consider parasocial relationships, as developing these can be more common in those with autism. Now, a parasocial relationship is a one-way form of attachment that is commonly experienced by fans of influencers and content creators, and is particularly prevalent in young, vulnerable people. Other examples of groups that attract parasocial relationships include pop artists and actors, certain characters. And as streamers and influencers blur the line between reality and fiction, parasocial relationships increase, along with the amount of influence these individuals have on their followers. In fact, research from the University of Essex early in 2024 showed that 52% of people say that they have a strong parasocial relationship. Now, these parasocial relationships can be particularly risky for individuals with autism, as they may have difficulty separating fantasy from reality, which can lead to high levels of risk, especially when interacting online or with media content. And this is particularly concerning given the prevalence of both gaming and gambling accounts on streaming platforms such as Twitch and Kick. Now let's move on to exploring the motivation to gamble amongst those with autism spectrum disorder. Again, the sensory stimulation of the sights, sounds, and excitement of gambling environments can be particularly attractive to those exhibiting sensory seeking behaviour. In addition, it's an accessible activity that provides a sense of community or belonging. The data and statistics around gambling may also be of interest if someone who is autistic has an obsession with numbers. The wins within gambling may be of particular importance to those who maybe don't have many wins in their real lives, which links back to the competence element of human motivation theory. Now, there has unfortunately been very little research around the links between autism and gambling harm. There is a school of thought that gambling harm may be higher with those who have an ADHD diagnosis alongside their autism due to the traits of ADHD mentioned earlier, such as impulsivity and the increased prevalence of addiction. However, a systematic review demonstrated that there was an increased risk of gambling harm with autism alone. This was shown when those with both autism and ADHD had their ADHD symptoms controlled through treatment but gambling disorder symptoms remained significant, showing that the ADHD was not necessarily the contributing factor in this case, but that the autism could be. So I now want to move on to OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So a mental health condition that causes unwanted thoughts and repetitive behaviours. These symptoms can be distressing and interfere with daily life. People of all ages, irrespective of their class, religion, or gender, can have a diagnosis of OCD. It usually starts in childhood, and it's thought that 1 to 2% of the population have OCD. But let's look at the links with gambling. Now, studies have suggested that OCD and gambling disorder share similar impulsivity, decision-making, and reward system dysfunction, suggesting OCD may have addictive components. So this puts those with OCD at a higher risk of partaking in gambling and other risky behaviours than the average population. People with obsessive compulsive disorder may be more likely to meet the diagnostic criteria for gambling disorder. In other words, people with OCD often exhibit symptoms that can overlap with those seen in gambling disorder, such as obsessions and compulsions. Now, a 2015 study published by JAMA Psychiatry found that those two conditions share genetic and behavioural links. Another study found that participants with both OCD and gambling disorder showed increased impulsivity and impaired decision-making compared to those without OCD. So both conditions involve a cycle of repetitive thoughts and behaviours that can be difficult to break and can significantly impact daily life. So let's take a look then at the links between OCD and gaming. Now, a 2016 study found that OCD was positively related to addictive use of both video games and social media. So this plays into how individuals with OCD overusing social media may experience a constant urge to check their social networks for new information and updates due to the fear of missing out. Addictive use of video games was also positively associated with a number of characteristics, including being male and single. Although that certainly doesn't mean that we should discount children and young people who identify as female, non-binary, and/or in relationships. Additionally, a 2023 study of just over 9,000 young people aged 9 and 10, led by researchers at the University of California, showed that the risk of developing OCD over a 2-year period increased by 15% for every hour spent playing video games, and by 13% for every hour spent watching videos over a 2-year period. Comparisons were made between screen addiction and OCD as they share common symptoms of compulsivity and loss of behavioural controls. Now, comorbidity with other risky behaviours can also play a factor into those with OCD. A comparative study between individuals with and without OCD revealed that those with an OCD diagnosis are significantly more likely to engage in drug and alcohol misuse. The findings include they're 4.5 times at greater risk of suffering from alcohol-related disorders, 6.7 times higher likelihood of experiencing any drug-related disorder, 10.5 times higher at risk for disorders related to the misuse of sedatives and other drugs, 1.2 times increased chance of receiving a substance use related criminal conviction, and 5.2 times at higher risk of dying from substance related causes. So how can you help? We can see that there are clear links with individuals who are neurodivergent and the likelihood of them turning to gaming or gambling as a stress reliever and coping mechanism. Given the complexities of the impact of neurodiversity on young people, specialist support is important to explore. But there are things that you can do to help. So provide clear rules and routines, set boundaries and limits on gaming that are clear and simple. Be consistent in your approach, as young people who are neurodiverse feel reassured in environments where the rules are straightforward and predictable. Provide them with alternative safe spaces and different ways to escape from external noise. So thinking back to the human motivation theory, reflect on what is missing for that young person and help them to find different offline activities to meet their needs that may be currently being met through gaming or gambling. Provide alternative treatment routes. Strategies such as cognitive behaviour therapy may not be successful for some individuals with neurodiversity, therefore offering a variety of signposting options and continuing to offer more if one fails may be necessary. And more screening. It's helpful to establish as early as possible whether someone is neurodiverse, to put the correct support in place and to find out who is more at risk when it comes to gaming and gambling harms. Likewise, if someone does present with gambling or gaming disorder, assessment for neurodiversity can help to identify any contributing factor and also aid with identifying the best forms of treatment. At YGAM, we focus on harm prevention, and we hope that early engagement with children and young people will help to reduce the risk of gambling and gaming related harm. However, it's also really important to highlight the other available support options because help is available. So the National Gambling Helpline, run by GamCare, provides support for adults experiencing gambling harms, but they can also redirect under 18s to the appropriate services. Now, there are NHS gambling clinics. You can self-refer to the clinic or be referred by your GP. While these mainly treat over 18s, the clinic in London will also accept England-wide referrals for over 13s. The National Gaming Clinic in London offers online therapy sessions for gamers. And then we have some services that are there to support in terms of mental health. A fantastic organisation, Shout, offers a 24/7 text service for anyone in the UK who needs mental health support. Papyrus provides advice and support around thoughts of suicide and is aimed at young people and anyone supporting them. Childline offers a broad range of help to anyone under 19. And Kooth provides online mental support and counselling for young people aged 11 to 25. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, and you can find more organisations on our Find Help section of our website. Thank you so much for taking time to watch this session. I hope it's been helpful and offered some insights into the links between gaming, gambling, and neurodiversity. If you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to get in touch via our website, ygam.org.